Gaz Whelan, and this is number 5 in my series of Sundays, Monday stories. I'll tell you about my experience in Happy Mondays over the years. This week's story comes from 1992, January, February, from Barbados. Lots of myths and incredible stories have come out about our time at Barbados, some of them true, some of them not. So I'm hopefully going to try to maybe clear that up today. I'll give you a kind of basic outline of my experience there. There'll be no, I won't stress on any particular story, but basically my experience of being there. It'd been 18 months since we'd finished Pills and Frills, and we'd been touring Pills and Frills and promoting it, which is normal for bands. You do usually 18 months and then you'll do a few weeks break, then a few months writing and then recording. But Factory had put us under pressure to get an album released, because I think New Order had been funding the label for long enough. I don't think it was our turn. The stories that came out that said that this album bankrupted Factory Records is utter nonsense. In fact, quite the opposite. When Factory finally, years later, went into bankruptcy, into receivership, they owed us a large amount of money and a large amount of money. So quite to the contrary, we didn't bankrupt. That was utter nonsense. Anyway, they wanted us to record an album. We weren't quite ready. We'd only written probably 5 or 6 songs. And Oakenfold and Osborne couldn't do it. They were busy, which is a blow because they'd done a great job on Pills and Frills. Osborne, the technical side of it, the arrangements, and Oakenfold was great when he'd play grooves and songs. He had great knowledge of soul music, and he'd play his records and say, "Look, listen to this feel," and we'd take that on board. And he was really instrumental in getting that kind of feel. So we was a bit concerned about not using them. We had several options. We had a meeting at Factory, and they told us we have 3 options. We can record in Manchester with several different producers were put forward. One was Stock Aitken and Waterman, which all the bands said no, apart from one person. So that was kibosh straight away. Excuse me. Second was Amsterdam, for obvious reasons, probably not a good idea. Plus, we'd probably have more people for Manchester visitors there than we would do if he was in the studio in Manchester. 3 was Barbados. Now, this was January, February in Manchester, so Barbados was very appealing. And it might sound really exotic to most people, but it cost no more than the other 2 studios. In fact, it's probably cheaper. It's like a 4-star rating studio. In fact, we had to hire some stuff in from Miami, some like outboard stuff, effects and all that. But it didn't cost that much more than the other 2 studios. In fact, I think it was a little bit cheaper. But then we had to add flights and accommodation, but it wasn't that much dearer. So obviously we all went for that. Well, most of us did. So that was a decision we were all happy with. But then we had to decide on a producer. Chris and Tina Weymouth had been put forward, who were Talking Heads, who we were big fans of, and the press had likened us to Talking Heads a few times. So and they were going to bring Bruce, a percussionist, and a Cuban percussionist from New York, and Mark, the engineer. So it was basically the Tom Tom Club, who we were huge fans of. So basically the Tom Tom Club were going to produce the album. So we were quite happy with that. And I think, with hindsight, they did a really, really good job. Different than Oakenfold. Tina was very hands-on in the studio as a musician, arrangements and what she do with songs. She's very vocal, and we got on very well. I think they did a really, really good job under the circumstances. It's one of our favourite albums for most of the band. I know me, Bez, Horse, and I think probably PD and Mark was our favourite album. Some great songs on there. There's a couple of moments that aren't great, but for the most part it's a great album. I think Rowetta's fantastic on there, on Sunshine and Love and Stinking Thinking. And lyrically I think it's a great album as well. After it got released, Factory was having issues, it had distribution issues, etc. So like Sunshine and Love, for example, was the second single, it had lots of airplay, lots of great reviews, but they couldn't get the distribution. So again, it wasn't down to us, but of course we got the blame for it. Anyway, Barbados it was, and we flew out from Manchester, and the story about the medicine being spilt at the airport as we were checking in is true. I remember it well. I think it's about a 9-hour flight to Barbados. We drank all the way. It was on something like Thomas Cook, one of them kind of tourist airlines. We arrived in Barbados early evening. We were greeted with rum punch and a steel band, and obviously we had several glasses of rum punch. Then we were taken to where we stayed, which is a place called Sam Lord's Castle, which was a 5-star all-inclusive resort. Now it was away from everywhere else in Barbados, because Barbados, all the holiday resorts are down the west coast and the south, because it's on the Caribbean, whereas the south and the west is on the Atlantic, so it's rough. So all the locals tend to live there. Sam Lords was kind of southeast, it was on the east side, so it was away from everything else. But it was a very exclusive resort, and it was close to Studio. Studio was only about a mile and a half away from Sam Lords, so it was perfect. We arrived, we were taken to Sam Lords, and it was mostly German and Austrian middle-aged people. We went to our bungalow. It was me and the two Pauls, Paul Ryder, Paul Davis. Usually we was in twos. Paul Ryder usually shared rooms with Bez, so this is quite different. But we dropped our stuff off, had a shower, and then went to the main arena, or what it was, the entertainment centre, had a drink and something to eat, and there was a band on called Spice, who like a covers band, of course. PD took exception to him early on. I remember later on in the night he was being escorted by security off the premises, so I don't know what went on. We were subtly asking people, where can we get some herbs, some weed, and eventually some German guy said, if you go down to the beach, there's a coconut tree and there'll be a guy sat underneath it called Bobby the Diver, and he'll serve you up. I thought that's quite stereotypical, maybe it's not true, but we walked down, I think me, Bez and Horse walked down, and true to his story, there was this guy with dreads, shorts on, sat under this coconut tree. So we go over and ask for, can he serve us up with some herb? And he says, yeah, I keep it in the ocean. It's Atlantic, so it's quite rough, in oyster shells. Of course he didn't, and we knew he didn't. But he went through, I won't do the accent, so he said he insisted, so he dived into the ocean. He was gone for 5 minutes, he came back. Then he climbed up the tree, said, I need to dry my hands. We could hear him rustling around with all the wraps, all his deals up in the tree. We knew he was up there. We weren't stupid, but every time we went back to Bobby, every time, he had to go through the same rigmarole every time. And we said, Bobby, we know it's up there, it's not in there, just cut to the chase. But he never did. And we got some herb and ended up crashing for the night, had a smoke, went to sleep. Woke up in the morning, and because we were a couple of miles from the studio, they'd hired us 5 hire cars from the hire company. Horse, Paul Ryder, was always the one to never walk anywhere, and always the driver, so he was up early to get the first hire car. He got the first hire car, came back, and I was awake. So let's go for a drive in the sunshine, the morning sunshine, so just me and Horse. I've just got shorts on, it's boiling hot. We're driving around these sugarcane fields, there's nothing around, just high sugarcane fields, that person walking past, nothing. We go through these, and I'm boiling, so I have a bit of bow and do, a bit of hijinks, peel my shorts off, throw them out the window. I know, I get done for littering now, won't I? But anyway, and we carried on, because there's no one about. I'm naked, he's driving around, and we're having a laugh, listening to the local radio station, listening to the music. We go through this little village, pull up about a quarter mile outside the village, the car just stops dead like that. Run out of petrol. Now when you hire a car, it usually comes full of petrol, but not in Barbados, and we didn't check. So Horse says, listen, I'll just from my lift back to the village, I'll get some petrol and come back and we'll sort it out and we can be off. So I'm there naked in the car, people walking past, I'm crouching down the car so they don't see me. Horse comes back about 20 minutes later with a guy with a car and a big tow rope and about 5 people with him. They all surround the car looking at me, so I pretend I'm ill. I'm sick, I'm like, oh. Horse clocks this and says, oh, he's got a temperature, that's why he's naked, he's cooling down. Oh, okay. They towed the car back to the petrol station. As we get to the petrol station, the guy's filling up. The guy who told us shouts to this lady, and she runs off and comes back, and there's like a guy with about 12 people with him. And we say, who's that? She said, oh, she's gone to get the doctor for your friend. And we're like, no doctor. Too late, they're filling the car up. The car's surrounded by about 30 people all looking at me, and I'm naked, sat in the car like that, all looking like pressed up against the window. And I'm like, Christ, I've not been here 24 hours. Anyway, we zoom off and they're all left looking at us. Oh, you don't want to see the doctor? We shoot off. So we go to the studio, we meet Chris and Tina, me and Horse, and we speak about how we're going to attack the plan for the album, the songs we've got to write, the arrangements of the songs we've got, and how we're going to progress and how we're going to make the album. And it sounds really good, everything's really good. We leave, we go back, early evening. We decide not to go into Sam Lords for a drink. There's a little shack outside Sam Lords, a proper shack. It's a little shack outside Sam Lords. So we go there, and it's just a wooden shack, and we go in and drink there, and it's owned by an ex-cricketer, of course. And we're in there for about an hour or so, and then we hear this car pull up, a couple of our lot coming in and out and go and come and go, and then we hear this car pull up about 1 a.m, and it slams its brakes on, but it's too late. It slams right into the bar. When we look round, the wood panel of the bar just lifts up, and this car, front of this car comes in, front bonnet of the car comes in. They don't try to reverse, they just get out of the car, walk in, it's one of our lot. The guy who owns is freaking out, so we all got cash we've got, so oh, we'll cover it, we'll pay for it, and he's happy, and we carry on drinking. That's day 1. Day 2, me and us get in the car and we drive to the studio. We're told halfway past the studio there's a place called Crack Village, excuse me, where it's 3 or 4 wooden shacks, and it's where all the crackheads are. I said, don't stop there, drive right through. So we notice people wandering around. It's a bit dodgy, we carry on to the studio. So we're there for 12 days putting the bass and drums down, the bass of the song, so we're kind of not privy to what's going on out there. Stories are coming back to the studio about what's going on, but we're kind of focused on what's doing. Horse is going through a divorce, and we're so focused. We're doing 12-hour days in the studio, working really hard, so we're really focused. So we're trying not to engage ourselves with what's going on outside. Anyway, by day 2 or 3, as we drive to the studio, we noticed some of these crackpots walking out, and they've got Adidas trainers on, and they're dressed like Mancunians with designer clothes, and all the clothes we're wearing. And each day it goes by more and more so. And then about the 5th day, one of our lots walking down at 8 in the morning with a kitchen chair on his back to trade in for gear. The stories are in the press are it was a 3-piece suite, wasn't it? It was a kitchen chair, but still it caused a lot of issues. So anyway, we kind of tried to keep away from all that, and the stories were flooding in, and there was murmurs around the studio. And there was a woman who was a manager of the studio. It was Eddie Grant, the singer. It was his studio, but he was away at the time. So there was a woman who managed it. She was a large African American woman. I can't remember her name, but she told us when we first met her, "I've had the Rolling Stones in here before you, and they were fine. And I was a worker with criminal youth in the Bronx, in New York. So nothing you can do can shock me." And we were like, "Oh, okay." Got off on the wrong foot straight away. We were like, "Oh no, of course not." And she used to answer the phone, instead of saying hello, she used to go, "Yes, please," hence the title of the album. Anyway, by about day 6, we used to finish at 6. We used to have a break at 6 o'clock, and I'd go up to the pool, which is like on a hill outside the studio, and have a joint and also have a cig. And we went up one day, and we noticed all the sun lounges around the pool had been brought together to make 2 little crack dens. We walked up, and they were little puffs of crack were coming out, and they'd made the crack dens by the pool. It was ridiculous. And also, me and Arse looked at each other and laughing, and then we noticed there was a jeep upturned in the wasteland past the studio. It's like there's like swamps and forest and woodland. It was a jeep upside down, and we remembered that one of the hire cars, Bez, had upgraded to a jeep because he wanted to do loads of off-road driving. So we went, "Oh, it's not Bez, is it?" So we checked the hospitals, and of course it was. He had a massive accident, turned upside down, smashed his arm to pieces, had these pins and a frame in it. It was in hospital. So anyway, so we go back to the studio and we do a few more days, and we go out the next day. As we're driving there each day, as we're driving home each night, there's more and more hire cars upside down and wrote off. And I think by the end of it, there was 9 hire cars that were just left at the side of the road, totaled, that we'd gone through, and we weren't allowed to hire a car anymore. We finished our 12 days, and my girlfriend, now wife, Vanessa, turned up. So we hired a house 5 miles away in the middle of nowhere to get away from it all. It's like a rotund 70s open plan house. There was this Belgian model who lived in Switzerland since the 60s, and it was still like the 60s. It had a little pool, chickens and a dog, middle of nowhere. So we were just smoking herb all day and then travelling. We hired our hire car. We still had our hire car intact, and we'd travel and go and eat, go to the studio and go and eat. So we kind of separated ourselves from it. And then Nathan McGough had come over, our manager, because there were problems, and said, because one of the band needs to dry out and keep him away from the crackpot village, can he stay with you for a while in the middle of nowhere? Of course. And obviously 2 days in, our car keys went missing, that car got totaled, so that was it, and it was just us 2 again. So that hire car had gone. So we had to go and hire a Mini Milk, which were popular there. They're like a cross between, like a 60s thing. You see the 60s, like a cross between a Jeep and a golf car, very 60s, and we hired one of them. So every day, me and Vanessa would go to the studio to have a listen, then we'd go over, drive to the West Coast, the tourist park, and get something to eat. And each night we noticed more people dressed like Mancunians and more written off cars, just everywhere, littered. Like I say, I think it was 9 in the end, so we couldn't hire any cars anymore. And the story come from the studio. We went back one day that because there was no way of them getting transport from the studio there where we were staying to the crack village, that one of the band members were stopped at 3 in the morning by the police on a donkey that they'd taken from the field next to the studio to try and score. Anyway, so the last week we were there, we were moved to a place called Chandos, which was across from the studio, across the island. It was on the western part where all the tourists was, right on the beach, and it was to give John some space to do some vocals. So we all decamped over there and left him with Chris and Tina and them to do vocals, and we all moved across. And one day, because it was out on the beach, this guy turned up on a jet ski with one of them little banana things and said, "Do you want to go on it?" Bez wanted to go on it. We said, "You can't go on it, you've got these pins with all, he's just come out of hospital, big frame on it." But once Bez has made his mind up, you can't stop him. So he goes on it, so we say to the bloke, "Go as slow as you can, he's got an arm, we don't want to, Guy says, okay. As soon as he starts off, Bez shouts to him, fast as you can, mate. He does, falls off, breaks his arm again, back in hospital. So by that time, the local authorities had enough of us and asked us to leave the island. So we had to leave, and I think Bez was stuck in, he had to stay in hospital for another week. He had to stay in Barbados in hospital for another week, but we all had to leave. And that's kind of my experience of Barbados. It wasn't too bad because I heard the stories, but I kind of removed myself from it. Because like I said, the first week I was in the studio, and then I was with a girlfriend in the middle of the night, and then we went over to Chandler. So I was kind of privy to a bit of it, but you know, the crack dens and the stuff. But it kind of, I have good memories from it. Maybe because I've heavily sedated. The local herb was very good. But I think it's one of our best albums. I think it's my favourite album. I think it's Bez's, Mark's, PD's. You know, I think some of our best musicianships on there, some of the best songs, some of the best lyrics. Roetta's fantastic on it, on Sunshine and Love and Stinking Thinking, lyrically and vocally. So I think and I think Angels, my favourite Monday song of all time, and that's on there. And ironically, the week after we'd got home, we went to Surrey to do the vocals, and I was down there, just me and Sean, and he was doing Angel. Maybe this is why it's my favourite song. And the song sings, where did the pain start, when did the symptoms begin? And he was a big fan of The Simpsons, and he said at 6 o'clock I want a break to watch The Simpsons. And if you listen to the second verse, he sings, instead of singing where did the pain start, where did the symptoms begin, he sings where does the pain start, where does the symptoms begin? And that's probably why I love it, and that's why at the beginning of the song I played, there was a track playing, and it was it's Bob's Your Uncle, and I did that because I thought it would be a great segue into a story about Yes Please and Barbados, but then it dawned on me that it's actually on Bills and Frills, it's not on this album. Anyway, that's my stories, and there's lots of myths and stories I think in 24 Hour Party. People have not seen the film, but about what happened in Barbados. So any stories, just post in the bottom, ask any questions, and I'll answer them honestly, what I can remember and what my take on it, my experience of it was, whether there's any truth in it or not, or it's just nonsense. So subscribe if you want to, because that helps me and it allows me to carry on doing this, and like if you don't. So until next week, I think I'll do a story next week about someone from the early days, quite contrast before we were successful. Anyway, until next week, I'm Gaz Whalen. Gaz Whalen? No, I'm not, I'm Gaz Whelan. So I don't even know who I am. See you until next week. So it is.